All right, so we're going to move on to the next part, which is going to be working with like hooks, virtuals, and indexes with our schemas. So this is like, up to this point, you can pretty much do anything with Mongo. Like what you've learned so far would take you like 80% of the way. Like even the connection logic, unless you're doing like some advanced stuff in production, is mostly the same even in production. You don't really have to change much. There's not much more you have to do other than what I've already taught you. What I'm going to teach you now is just like take it to the next level just a little bit, just thinking about it in general and how to get it there. So the first thing I want to talk about is virtuals. So we've already been working with virtuals, and a virtual is nothing more than a field. You can think of it as like a getter. If you ever use like objects, JavaScript objects where you can set getters on properties that don't actually exist, but you can like create them when you ask for them, that's what a virtual field is. So if I want a field on this school that like just concatenated all the strings together, but I didn't want to save that in a database, I could make a virtual for that. So when I ask for it, a function will run and give me back the value for it. So it's a getter. It's a virtual thing. It's not actually saved in a database. It's computed when I ask for it based on some properties. So that's a virtual. You can do the same thing for set. So you can set a virtual. So I can set a property that doesn't exist in a database, but when I actually set it, there's a function that runs and it sets real properties in the database. So it's like building a domain model around your actual database model, if you will. So that's what you can do. It's pretty handy for virtuals. If you ever use something like GraphQL, GraphQL is literally just virtuals. So if you've ever used GraphQL, it's the same thing. So that's what we're going to do. And one of the virtuals we've been using this whole time is .id. Any document that you get back has a .id property on it. But if you look at the database, there's no such thing as an ID property. It's underscore ID. So how did that get there? Well, Mongoose created a .id virtual for you because who wants to write underscore ID all the time? So they just made one for you. And that's a built-in virtual, but you can make your own. So that's what you're going to do on the next exercise. So I'm just going to show you how to do some of those virtuals. So I'm just going to clean some of this stuff up right quick so it's not so noisy in here. We'll just stick with the school one. It's pretty easy. And there we go. So to create virtuals and pretty much everything dealing with the schema, all you'd have to do is use the schema object itself. So the schema instance that we created for the school is going to be returned from Mongoose schema. So this right here is more than just an object that we pass to mongoose.model. We have this schema. We can do some pretty amazing things with it. We can add different query methods that we want. We can make our own query methods, our own mutation methods, our own helpers, instance methods. Like pretty much whatever we want, we can do here. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to add virtuals. So we're going to add a virtual for the school. And the way you would do that is you would grab the schema object itself after you create the schema, and you do the .virtual here. So if you do a .virtual, which is a function, you can pass in whatever value you want here that's not a real field. So if I pass in a field called staff count, like this, now what I would have to do is I can define getters and setters on this virtual. A getter is a function that's going to be called when someone tries to retrieve this property called staff count. A setter is a function that's going to be called when someone tries to set the value of staff count. For right now, we're just going to do getters. So I'm just going to say when something in my code tries to get the value for staff count, run this function. And this part is important. So if you know ES6 and if you use an arrow function, does anybody know what an arrow function does differently than a regular function in ES6? Yeah.
It binds this.
Right. It keeps the same context of this. So in this case, the context inside of this function would be the same context of whatever is out here. And that's normally OK. In this situation, it's not OK because we need to reference properties of the school instance. And in order for that to work, we're going to use the this keyword. But we need to keep that context different, so we have to use a regular function here. So if you use an arrow function here, your code will not work. 100% won't work because the this inside of the arrow function will be the this of whatever is in this scope right here. And we're not in the browser, so this won't refer to window. We're in Node, so it'll refer to something else. But it for sure won't be the instance of a school. So make sure you use a regular function here. And that's just with JavaScript in general. If you're going to be using a function that's going to be using the keyword this, make sure you're using the right this. So what we want to do here is all we're going to do is just return the length of the staff. So we'll say return this dot staff dot length. And this, remember, is referring to whatever school instance it is that we're asking the property for. Staff is going to be the property called staff, which should be an array. And arrays have length, so I'm just going to get the length property on it. So I'm just going to return this dot staff dot length. This is going to give me a virtual field called staff count. It's not in the database. It's not on a schema. I can't save it anywhere. It's computed for me. So to verify this, I'm going to create a school. So we'll create a school. We'll put a name, my school. And then we'll add some staff here so we can actually see that count. And these are just strings, so I'll just add some strings here. There we go. Actually, we'll just do that. So now that we have a school, we can see what that is. So I'm just going to console.log my school dot staff count. And when I log this, it's going to actually execute this function right here. So we should be able to verify that if I put a log here. And we can just say in virtual. So put a log there. So this is me doing a getter. See, I'm accessing the property called staff count. This is me trying to get it. So that's going to trigger, you can think of this as like middleware. It's like a listener. It's like, oh, you're trying to get staff count. Cool, I got to run this function. I'm going to return whatever value is here. So that's why that's going to run. So actually run this code. So you can see it immediately, before it even returned the value, it first went inside the virtual. It was like inside the virtual, in virtual. So it ran this first. Then the value was returned, and then it logged here. So you can see now I have 3, which is exactly how many strings I have in this array. So that's how you would do a virtual. So it's doing it synchronously. So that means you probably don't want to put async code inside your virtuals. Probably not. I mean, it's not to stop you from doing it, but I mean, you would have some pretty confusing code if you did that. I think that actually the runtime might even break. So yeah, I would probably avoid that. So yeah, keep things synchronous. Use them if you just want to do like some quick computing on some virtual paths. ID is a really good example, or anything like that. Any questions on virtuals? No, pretty straightforward. I like virtuals. They're really legit.